Episode 322. Jeremy is jealous.
Julianne wants to eat tater tots.
Julianne's sweet voice sounded as she pointed to the big tater tots on the table, licking her mouth and looking at Serena.
Mom, I want to eat that.
Serena smiled and took a tater tot. Let Dad cool it for you. Julianne looked at it with her mouth watering and immediately nodded. Serena gave her something else and said, Eat something else first. Jake's lips curled, blowing the hot tater tots. He asked, Does Julianne want tomato sauce?
Yes.
Julianne licked her mouth and looked at the tater tots eagerly. Jake took it in his hand and dipped it into a little tomato sauce. He deliberately teased her. What do you call me?
Dad.
Julianne had no principle or stance whatsoever. She stared at the tater tots in his hand and shouted,
Dad, I want to eat that.
Jake was overjoyed and fed it to her. Julianne directly opened her mouth and smiled happily. Serena fed her a spoonful of rice and Julianne also ate it, chewing busily. Jeremy was eating his rice while looking at his side enviously. He looked at Drake and said,
Uncle, I want it too.
Drake was busy eating his food and did not even glance at him.
Ask your father to blow it for you. He's really good at that.
Jeremy saw that he didn't want to help and became upset. He snorted and grabbed the tater tots himself, but it was too hot. Jeremy dropped it on the plate. Seth looked at him with amazement and asked,
Is it too hot, Jeremy?
Jeremy felt that he was being provoked and said with his face straight,
Of course not. What's the big deal?
Saying that, he touched the tater tots and shrank his hand back, being burned. Jake slowly picked up the tater tots, handing some to Serena, and said,
Eat more. This season is really delicious.
Serena knew that he said that deliberately. She glanced at Jeremy and saw that his little face was wrinkled. His eyes were red, and he turned his head to stare at his father. He simply placed it on the table and refused to eat it. He could have chose not to have it. What's the big deal? Humph. Jeremy took out the spoon and went to dig the meatballs not far from him, unwilling to call Jake Dad. The adults looked at each other and looked at Jake. He was eating elegantly, without any desire to help the kid. Serena nudged him and said, Jeremy also likes tater tots.
Oh, is that true?
Jake looked at Jeremy and asked,
Do you want it? Should I blow cold one for you?
Jeremy looked away with his eyes red and said coldly with his tender voice,
No. Oh, forget it then.
Jake didn't mind him, picked up a tater tot dipped in the sauce, and handed it to Julianne. Julianne happily ate it and shouted happily,
It's delicious. Thank you, Dad.
Jake's smile became deeper and he looked down at Jeremy. Serena kicked him and motioned him to pamper the little guy. Jake smiled gently and shook his head at her. In the end, Serena couldn't help it. She took the tater tots her husband put in the bowl to the bowl of Jeremy. She said, Try some, Jeremy. It's not hot and delicious too. Jeremy looked down and became happier, but he didn't eat it right away, but ate it together with his rice after eating something else. Tasty?
So. I don't really like it now. I only ate it because you gave it to me,
Jeremy said deliberately, looking down. Serena couldn't help but smile, and Jake was smirking on the side, and he said,
I didn't have such a false sense of pride when I was young.
Jeremy blushed and glanced at him upset. After quickly eating the rice in his bowl, he went down the stool and claimed,
I'm full.
After that, he ran away. When Jeremy ran away, Serena was displeased, reached out and pinched on Jake's waist. That is your son. Why are you serious with him? Childish. Jake touched his waist with grievances and said,
It is obvious that the kid's mad at me. Why don't you pinch him instead?
Serena gave him a look, pushed him away, and went back to eat. Keith saw them like that, smiled, and looked down to eat. Finally back, the old Serena. After the meal, Serena sent Seth to play with her daughter, and she went to her son's room alone. Jeremy didn't turn on the light, so it was very dim, and the little guy was sitting alone on the stool, painting. When noticing that Serena came in, he immediately closed his painting album. Serena turned on the light and saw the album under his hands, gently closed the door, and walked over. What are you painting? Serena's voice was soft. She walked over to the little guy and leaned over to look at the album he was hiding under his hand. Can you show it to Mom? Jeremy heard it and shook his head.
This is my secret. Mom should not look.
Serena laughed and rubbed his hair. Now you have a secret, little boy.
Mom, although I'm still a child, but I also have my secrets.
Jeremy pursed his lips and removed her hand. Jeremy is now a big boy and has little secrets that cannot be shared with his mom. Serena looked sad and sat down on the small bed behind him. Do you dislike Dad?
I hate him.
Jeremy was very, very unhappy. Why? Jeremy didn't know why. He just did not like the guy. Why did he talk to Julianne and not talk to him? Why did he blow cold tater tots for his sister and not for him? Jeremy felt jealous, but he couldn't put that into words. Holding the album with his tender little hands, Jeremy quietly pouted. Tomorrow, let Dad take us out, all right? Where does Jeremy want to go? Jeremy shook his head and could not voice the grievances in his heart. He said,
No, I don't want to go with him. I miss Uncle Henry. Can you call Uncle Henry for me, Mom?
Uncle would not do this to him. Uncle Henry was so nice to him, unlike that person who was not kind at all.